got the news. Justin Roilands is been canned from everything. Really stemmed off of the domestic abuse case and unlawful. What is it? Basically, holding his ex-girlfriend in the house in 2020. And apparently, really bad. Because initially in my mind, I was like, was he just holding her because he was like super paranoid of the pandemic? But like, if it's enough that everybody's canning you, I mean, hard, and it's been 2 years since that case that you pleaded not guilty and you got let out on a bond, it must be pretty bad. It must be pretty serious.
And if that's not bad enough for you, the Twitters.
The text messages.
Ouch. Not Twitters, texts.
DMs, to say the least. And like, when every single one of them always goes like, well, but he said but he was drunk. It was like, nah, man.
No
like,
way.
Yo, you need to be.
No way.
There's no way enough smart. Like, for me, it's interesting because I don't find them as so much. I mean, they're disgusting, but in the sense of like, it's just the utter irresponsibility of how you are communicating with a person who's a fan. It's their fans that are talking to you, like you, and then of course they're also telling you that they're underage. So like, what are you engaging with at this point? Like, you even like, I read them, and like one of them is like, oh yeah, you're jailbait. It's like, yo, bro, this is 2000, at least at the time, 2015. Like, this is past this term. You're well within your right mind to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's
so,
just. Yeah, I mean,
his canning is deserved.
Oh, it absolutely is, and I don't think I've heard anyone kind of jumping to his defense, because I thought we would. When I first heard, the first thing came to my mind, this is going to be another cancel culture war about this, that, and the other. And the first I heard of it was actually the case. There was a case pending about this, isn't it? And like most people, I get a bit annoyed that cases get brought before people and they get presumed
guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, they're guilty, and all the stuff that goes on. And I looked at the charge, I thought, they're not pretty. But the tweets, not the tweets, but those texts.
The DMs. I mean, it's still the same thing.
No one can come to his defense on that, and Adult Swim had no choice but to show him the door.
But it wasn't just Adult Swim. Like, his kicked out. Like, I didn't realize how many things he started, though. Like, he legitimately was creating jobs between. It was obviously Rick and Morty, as we'll talk about a little bit more. It's Squish Games, his video game company.
Squanchy.
He created Squash Games. And then it was some of the Disney shows that he had that I've never watched in my life, but he created. So it's just like, man. So the big question is, what happens now with Rick and Morty? Because Justin Roiland is the voice of almost everybody on that show. He's the
voice of the two main characters, and
then some.
And then some. And it's like everyone I've heard to listen to today have said, well, they're going to come back. I mean, there was a lot more episodes and a lot more seasons. They're contracted to a lot more. And of course, Dan Harmon is there. He's in some ways the mastermind to an extent.
Yeah.
But for all of Dan Harmon's, puppeteering as the main playmaker, Justin Roilands is the voice of those two characters, as much as Seth MacFarlane created his characters.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not someone who. These are not characters who got kind of like The Simpsons. Well, we're going to have a father, we're going to have a mother. Let's go cast that. These Dan and Justin created these characters. They came from within Justin. And the thing, particularly Rick, he's a very complicated character. He's not an easy guy to get your hands around. So he's imbued him with probably a lot of his own soul, a lot of his own thoughts, a lot of his own feelings, a lot of his own ideas. And that comes through his voice work. It comes through tiny little nuances we probably will have no idea until someone else does it.
Right.
And I remember a couple of weeks ago when we last had a talk, you said, well, I used to like Community until Troy left, and you hear
Yeah.
that all the time. I used to like Two and a Half Men, and Two and a Half Men's a really
Until
good until half the
Sheen.
cast
Yeah.
left. And yep, Ashton Kutcher had all the credentials. He was a big star. I don't like Ashton Kutcher, but let's put that aside. He had all the credentials. He had all the comedy chops. Was very much a good-looking guy, but he wasn't that guy.
Yeah.
And my feeling is this is what's going to happen. They're going to find someone who can do the voice,
Yes.
but it won't have the soul of Rick and it won't have the soul of Marty because that was Justin Roilands. And I'm already predicting people saying it just wasn't the same.
Yeah.
They're going to say, because I know I last talked to you about season 5. I thought maybe the show was on its last legs. Season 6 was actually quite good. So I was looking forward to these future seasons. But now this has put a huge question mark over if anyone else can imbue those characters with the soul and the spirit of Rick and Morty, like Justin Roilands did. Dan Harmon can get them a fair way, but not even Chuck Lorre or John What's-His-Face, who on Two and a Half Men couldn't inject a new Charlie. They couldn't create a new Charlie. And I have my severe doubts whether they're going to be able to do this again.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of whenever Disney replaced Robin Williams with Dan, the guy who plays Homer Simpson's for Aladdin 2. While it was like the sound of him, but it didn't have the feel of the genie. The genie was greatly underplayed in the second one, and you needed to bring him back for the third one where it felt natural again. I will say that with it, and even with Rick and Morty, they even talked about the fact that Dan Harmon did build a lot of the scripting around actions that Justin Roiland actually did.
Yes.
And so it does speak a huge volume to what is the like you said, the soul and the feeling is going to be, because now you don't have this guy who is basically a two-voice recreation of these characters, almost equivalent of trying to replace Robert Downey Jr. with like Liam Hemsworth or something like that. It would just it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. That being said, I do trust the fact that a lot of this is also going to come out within the writing. And if I felt like Justin Roiland was more involved in the writing as opposed to the executing, I would be a lot more fearful. I think the difference that actually happened with Community was, like, using that example, was the factor that it wasn't just that Troy left, but Dan Harmon left as well too.
Yeah.
And so it greatly affected how everything goes. The other part is there's something even like with The Simpsons. You can feel the difference between when Conan O'Brien was a component of the staff and then whenever he was removed, whenever he left to go do his own thing. Very small changes. And then over time, you can actually feel as staffers start to leave how the quality of the writing goes, but the sounds are still the same. So I feel like, at least with Dan Harmon, at least still being in the throes of things, they can shift the writing. Now, I do think that they're going to find a way to adjust where they'll have an explanation for a variation of the voice differing, because Justin Roiland wasn't a talented person. He was just a what's the word? He was
unique.
Like when a person's the character is really extra.
I know what you're saying. He was. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I can't think of the word either, but
but he eccentric. He was an eccentric person, and so that eccentricity, I do feel like they'll be able to find somebody who's neurotic enough, but the sound is not going to be the same. And I wonder if it's going to be more important that the person is able to contribute to the feeling of the person or contribute to the sound of the person.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the biggest question here.
That's my feeling.
Yeah. Because I feel like with Dan Harmon, if you try and recreate the sound of Rick and Morty as we know it, because the sound of Rick and Morty is supposed to even just be the sound of Christopher Lloyd and and Michael,
Marty.
yeah,
Michael J. Fox.
Michael J. Fox at the same time. So, I mean, what would happen if they brought old man Christopher Lloyd into to do that and just like
that character has they've taken that concept and gone way away from that.
They've gone an extra way, but that's the pleasure of this world is that they can do whatever with it because its purpose is its fluidity.
Let's remind our friends to please click on the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you know when we have new videos out.
Subscribe!
Subscribe!
Die. Oh, die.